All right, so Mondays with Mike, yet
Hello.
again.
Yes.
So talked about pro formas, NOI, talked about rent rates, right? Now let's talk about ratios, right? Bottom of that pro forma, looking at the deal, we've got cap rates, we've got cash on cash return, there's debt service coverage ratio, there's internal rate of return, there's kind of a slew of different ratios and analysis you can do. I know what I like to pay attention to. I think that for me, I've always sort of gravitated towards cash on cash and cap rates. Those have been, looking at residential, that's the place that I've usually calculated numbers. But what are your thoughts on what do you see as the best place to go? What numbers do you want to pay attention to? And what doesn't matter, as you're getting started versus you've been in this a while?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think for new investors, a lot of that stuff is a lot of math and a lot of new information. And if you are listening to podcasts and reading books, you really quickly come across some calculators that have so much information that it's kind of making a paralysis by analysis. And what's really important is a couple numbers for a new investor on their first couple properties. So the bank cares about the debt service coverage ratio.
And quickly, what is the debt service coverage ratio?
Yeah, so that's the NOI over the payment for what you're looking at for financing. So NOI, as we previously covered, is your rent minus all your expenses. Don't leave any expenses out or the bank will just add them back in. So it's all your expenses. That's your net operating income. That's how much cash is left over to either go in your pocket or pay for the loan. And when you go get a loan, the bank wants a buffer. So the buffer is the coverage ratio. So they want 20 to 25%. It's always going to be 1.2 or 1.25. They want 20 to 25% coverage to feel comfortable that if a bump happens, you still have enough to pay the payment.
So you have $1,000 mortgage payment. The bank's going to want to see your NOI be at least
$1,200.
$1,250 ideally,
Yep.
or better.
Yep.
And then you're getting that ratio because you're covering 25% more than the payment liability.
Exactly.
Okay, so that matters for the bank financing side,
Right.
right? We want to check that box.
Right.
What about just from an investor standpoint, right? Not looking at what the bank's going to approve. We know we need the debt service coverage ratio or DSCR for financing. What's the other tools that you can use to just analyze the deal for yourself?
Right. So there's lots of different ways to get into property, and ultimately you're getting into it to make something. And so if you're putting cash into something, even if say you have some seller financing and you're buying the property, but you got to fix it up and you're putting that cash in one way or another, say you're putting any cash in, you kind of want to look at your return on that cash. So and that's a cash on cash return. So that's the basic kind of what am I getting for what I'm putting into it. And that's a really simple calculation. It's just how much you put in. Say you put $10,000 into this deal, maybe that was in the repair and the seller finance that, or maybe you put $30,000 on the deal with the down payment. What is left over after your debt payment? So your NOI minus your payment, which cash is left over, divided by the cash you put in it.
So let's say you put $10,000 in. Your NOI is $1,300. You have a $1,000 mortgage payment, right? So you're left with $300.
Yeah.
So like in that situation, you're making what, $3,600 a year. You'd be running essentially in that situation, you'd have a 36% cash on cash return. Essentially, you'd be made whole within 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, when you do your cash on cash return, are you taking into account the appreciation value if you were to exit the property, or is this just simply how much money's coming in every month versus how much money I had to shell out when I bought it?
It's just the cash part.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.